For most of history, survival knowledge was not shouted, branded, or widely advertised. It was passed quietly, deliberately, and often reluctantly. You learned it from someone who had survived long enough to matter, usually after proving you were worth teaching. Today, survival advice is loud by design. It competes for attention, clicks, and authority. That contrast is not accidental, and it explains why so much modern advice fails when conditions stop being theoretical. If you want to understand survival as history understood it, you have to start with why silence mattered. The first reason is simple. Survival knowledge was dangerous in the wrong hands. Knowing how to track without being seen, move without leaving signs, find water where others couldn't, or stay warm without fire could make someone powerful. In tribal societies, frontier communities, and military units, this knowledge was not neutral. It could be used to steal, raid, desert, or kill. Teaching it indiscriminately created risk, so it was controlled. This is why historical survival skills were taught through apprenticeship, not instruction. You watched first, you helped second, you were taught last. Silence was part of the filter. If you couldn't observe, remember, and apply without constant explanation, you were not ready. The second reason survival was taught quietly is that it relied on context, not rules. Historical survivors understood that rigid instructions fail under changing conditions. You don't survive cold by memorizing temperatures. You survive by learning how your body reacts, how moisture behaves, how terrain channels wind, and how effort generates heat. None of that translates well into slogans or step-by-step formulas. Silence forced attention. When nothing was explained verbally, you had to notice small changes. Sound, smell, animal behavior, weather shifts, human patterns. This awareness was survival itself. Modern advice often replaces awareness with instruction, which is easier to consume but harder to apply when reality diverges from the script. Another reason silence mattered is that survival was inseparable from routine. Historical survivors didn't practice survival, they lived it. Fire management, tool maintenance, clothing repair, navigation, and food acquisition were daily habits. Teaching happened in passing, embedded in work. There was no performance aspect, no audience, no urgency to impress. This matters because, modern survival culture often treats knowledge as an event, a course, a video, a checklist. But, history treated it as background noise to life. The quieter it was, the more permanent it became. Silence also reduced false confidence. When knowledge is loudly explained, people assume understanding equals capability. But history shows this is not true. Soldiers who memorized manuals, froze to death beside veterans who said very little but adjusted constantly. Frontiersmen who talked the most often died first. The quiet ones watched, waited, and moved when it mattered. Modern advice rewards certainty. Historical survival punished it. There's also, a brutal truth that modern advice tends to avoid. Survival knowledge was often learned through failure and loss. People didn't exactly broadcast lessons that had been paid for with lives. Instead, they internalized them. They passed them on sparingly. In many cases, silence carried respect for the consequences. This is why, honestly, a lot of historical methods feel incomplete when described today. They were never meant to be standalone techniques. They were just fragments of a much larger system of awareness, judgment, and restraint. When you strip them of that context and then amplify them online, they really just become gimmicks. The loudness of modern survival advice isn't just a stylistic thing. It actually reflects a shift in incentives. Content now has to be memorable, repeatable, and definitive. But you see, History was none of those things. Survival knowledge changed with terrain, season, group size, and threat. Teaching it loudly, honestly, would have just created false expectations. This is also why, historical survivors distrusted novelty. Loud ideas were usually untested ideas, while quiet methods had already proven themselves. If something worked, it didn't need explanation. And really, if it needed explanation, it probably hadn't worked long enough. So what does this mean now? It doesn't mean silence is always better. What it really means is survival knowledge should be absorbed differently than, say, entertainment. Less instruction, more observation. Less certainty, more adaptability. Less gear, more judgment. The most important lessons are not the ones you can explain quickly. They're the ones you only notice after paying attention for, well, quite a long time. If history teaches anything consistently, it's that survival was never about knowing more techniques. It was about knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to change. That kind of knowledge doesn't shout. It survives quietly. If this perspective resonates and you want more historically grounded survival insight that, really cuts through noise instead of adding to it, subscribe to the channel, share this with someone who's tired of loud answers, and keep learning the way history intended, carefully, quietly, and with respect for reality. Strange.